it is not a control C, control V. The country is very nuanced. People who come here with an Excel sheet or a returns first mindset, they have to reorient themselves about India.
I don't think every venture fund needs to be $1 billion fund. In fact, the storied firms in 96 that I went to, some of them don't even exist.
72% of women are making their own financial decisions. This number is absolutely not true in India. I think it's more like 7%.
Top down, we are 4 trillion in GDP, 5 trillion in stock market cap. Bottom up, there are questions about job creation, there are questions about, what are core sectors that will drive us into the next decade? What will AI do to our services economy?
It's no secret that India's momentum is unstoppable, but behind the headlines and unicorn valuations lies a deeper story of transformation, resilience, and a new generation of leaders shaping the future of venture. In this special $1 Billion Moves live panel from Bangalore, we bring together some of the women and men changing the face of capital, from Vani Kola, one of India's most respected venture pioneers, to Priya Mohan, that formally steered the next $1 billion bets at General Catalyst, Shuvi Shrivastava of Lightspeed India, and Aarti Gupta, representing the growing force of family offices fueling innovation. Together, we explore one urgent question: what's next for venture, and how do we truly democratize opportunity for women founders and funders in India's next growth decade?
I want to start with Priya Mohan because, of course, if you all have seen the news, General Catalyst, the storied VC firm in Silicon Valley, has just acquired Venture Highway, and they will be investing over $1 billion, in true beyond the billion fashion, $1 billion in India. Set the scene here for us, Priya. Where are we in venture in India, and what have you seen in the evolution?
Okay, let me start by saying, firstly, thank you for having me. And I want to caveat when you say evolution, this is a long game, and I've been doing this only for 7 years. She knows evolution more than I do, right? But I'll just share my observations. A little bit of my background. I grew up in Chennai. I actually wanted to be a dancer, right? And I was performance dancer for a long time. I chose not to do dance because there was no money in it. And then I did my chartered accountancy, very happenstance, because to be respectable for my family, and then meandered a bit. The reason I say this story is, I think I've been very privileged to have agency and choice throughout, to just try things. And that has continued in my life, right? When I joined Venture Highway, I told only one thing to my partner: I might really suck at being a VC because I'm a terrible employee, and I always think like a founder. So I'm going to give this 6 months, and I will tell you before you fire me that I'm not cut out for the job. But then we landed up building Venture Highway like a startup, and it's been 7 years, and then the GC thing happened. I think in India, there are a couple of nuances that people in the West, at least I keep having this argument, that it is not a control C, control V. The country is very nuanced. It's very different here. So people who come here with an Excel sheet or a returns first mindset, they have to reorient themselves about India. And the best comparison is comparing a teenager with a middle-aged person. We are in the cusp of evolution. There's a little bit of adolescence, but we're going, there's a little bit of a growth spurt that's going to happen compared to a place like Valley, which is a very, very different ballgame, very different evolutionary life cycle that they've had. That comparison is very important to understand, right? So when you see that, the depth of even the number of founders, the culture of entrepreneurship is fairly young here, right? And we come from a background where, post-colonization to history, people are just today getting the fire in the belly to say, it's legitimate to be an entrepreneur. And that's happened in the last few years, right? Now, layer that with women coming into that, right? And I think the last point I'd like to make, and I'll hand it over to others, is that the key is to democratize the opportunity and not lower the bar. And that's a very important distinction that we have to understand. In a place where talent is growing, depth is growing, I think when we are addressing issues of women participation, the question is more about democratizing the opportunity.
Right. And what does it take to democratize the opportunity? Vani, you've been at this, as was noted by everyone here, far longer than anyone else. You've seen the arcs and the peaks and troughs. What does it take to really, truly democratize opportunities for women? And what are your thoughts here on the venture landscape?
Yeah, like you said, I've been at it longer. That's the only claim I can definitely lay to. And I think that's why, this notion of evolution and everything comes up. But I'm really happy, though, to see so many young women in my profession now. Just look at this stage, right? They are half my age, everyone on the stage. So I think that's one step to democratization. Of course, the numbers don't show that. It's 6% of women get funding, and in venture capital, the number of GPs is like less than 2%. Like everywhere, women start today, if we just take a step today, from when I started in my engineering school, we were 7 women in the entire batch, okay? Today, that is a very good number, meaning today there is at least 30% to 40%, depending on the discipline, or women going into engineering. But what happens is, as we grow in our career, for many reasons, it's complex. And so there are no simple silver bullet answers, that ranks drop down. And in my own profession of venture capital, let alone the LP landscape, who of course make decisions on who they fund, women GPs are very less. There are more number of women coming in, analyst, associate, principal, so on and so forth. But when it comes to then really where the strategic decision-making lies in terms of how you're going to allocate capital and so forth, that is very, very less, right? Now, what can we do about it? I have grown up my entire life being a bit of an outlier in every sense. Like Priya, I grew up in South India, though in Hyderabad, in a very middle-class family where I was the first woman to go into a professional school, and it was because I had like a hunger strike for 3 days with my parents saying, I'm going to do this. And they're like, why? So I've always been a bit of an outlier. But I was lucky that I had a household and support system that gave me agency. As Priya said, let me do what I wanted to do, even if they wanted to stop me more from love and worry than from truly ideology. Ideology was we want to help you do what makes you happy, right? So I was very, very lucky that way. That actually, I share that because whether it's at home or at work, you need a few people. There'll be many people who'll say no. Of course, that's part of life of trying to be an outlier. But we can't be an outlier alone. We need somebody that says, fine, I support you. For me, my father, my husband, the male in my life were that, right? And then consequently, my bosses, in fact, when I started my first startup, our CEO said to me, yeah, you can do it. And I was like, I can? Okay. It's good that somebody thinks so, right? And you need somebody to think so. Said, I'll give you angel funding. So you do need believers, right? That's very important. And that, whether that's male or female, there are fewer females in a position of power to be able to make that choice for you, or that support for you. So you do need the male allies, if nothing else, because they are more in number. So you got to go seek that. But to close this ramble, the question of democracy for me, I'm not a big policy person. I would fail if I was in that kind of a role because I'm a more action kind of a person. Action is small steps. What can I do? And we all have power to do something. It might not be about waving a wand and changing the world, but we all have some power. That power could be just to encourage that one woman or, other things. And when we raised our last fund, we allocated certain amount of capital, created a small internal team that said we will fund women businesses. Not that the bar is any lower. It's just that we are listening in and supporting from a very different place of objectivity. That's what it is. Ultimately, in our business, every company, they have to create value. If they don't create value, support doesn't really matter. But support is important because I know that when I did my first company in 1996 in Silicon Valley, I would have gone to 100 venture capitalists who all said no.
Yep.
Some of it may have to do with genuinely my business plan sucked or whatever. But, ultimately in 3 years after I got funding, we sold the business for 1.2 billion. So it couldn't have been that bad, right? But somebody has to support you, and you only need one person to support. So from the other side of the table, just be prepared to accept no. And don't make it very personal, right? Just continue. There'll be somebody who'll say yes.
And Vani, for Kalaari, for those, of course, we have an international audience who may not have the context of how you've grown Kalaari so quickly.
So Kalaari is a venture capital firm based in India, funding in India, and I started that in 2006. But I did 2 software companies in Silicon Valley before I got to this, right? And so I have kind of understanding from both sides of the table. But to wrap up, I only want to say 2 things. To me, democratization means from wherever we are, as a venture capitalist, I have a responsibility to, Sarah, you asked about being here today, and I said, I don't think in my 20s and 30s this was that important to me to claim my place as a woman, If anything, I probably was shy or worried even to claim that place. But today I'm not. I'm 60, there is a past, and I don't really care what somebody has to think or say anymore. But I think I wish I had claimed my place earlier to, not just as a software CEO or whatever, but yes, I'm a woman, and yes, if I'm an outlier, so be it. But I'm going to do what I can to also give some of my time, energy, leverage that I have towards what can we do to lift everyone, right?
Yep.
And on the other side, as a founder, if you feel disheartened, if you feel ever disheartened, founder or otherwise, all I can tell you is I have found you will always find somebody. It may take time. It may be 100 people say no and the 101 will say yes to you. But if there is any testament I can offer, it is that you will find your tribe.
Yeah, love that sharing. And before I pass it to you, Shuvi, I do want to turn to the family office angle that, of course, Aarti, we've spoken at length about the potential here. I was just looking at the numbers earlier. It was $1 trillion in terms of the richest in India. The wealth mark has just passed $1 trillion. We have more billionaires than ever before. And of course, this great wealth transfer that we talk about is a transformative shift. Where do you see, of course, we have 3 GPs here that are running the venture firms. Where do you see the role of family offices in India that, interestingly, is built by family businesses in many ways?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. And wonderful to be here, just to set some context, like I accidentally fell into setting up our family office. To let everyone know, when I started managing investments for my father-in-law, I didn't know, it was 14 years back, I didn't know I was setting up a family office. There were almost 0 women doing this, leave alone daughter-in-laws of the family, heading family offices. So it was such a new concept. So completely agree to Vani's point about being an outlier, right? And coming back to your point, Sarah, I just recently read the statistic, 1 crore people in India have or own 500 lakh crores of wealth. Wow. Let that number sink in. Only 1 crore of people in India have access to 500 lakh crore of wealth. And these individuals are actually moving towards financialization of assets, right? They're looking to move their money into financial assets, be it the public markets, be it the private markets. The sheer number of family offices, I think it was about 45 in 2018, has grown to 300 today. And I think there are a lot more, but it's just that a lot of people don't even know that they're operating as family offices, but they're still sort of managing and investing. Those who I've interacted with, and I know majority of them, 83% I think is the number, are investing into privates. So there is a huge, huge interest from family offices to invest into privates, invest into startups. Having said that, is enough funding coming to women GPs or women-led startups? Absolutely not. Vani quoted that number, about 4.5% of funding is coming to women startups. India did see its whole funding winter, but we are seeing the whole curve sort of turn back up in 2024. We saw a number of amazing IPO listings and a lot of wealth creation done for both men and women founders in India. And that's a huge sort of boost to a lot of people, right? So family office participation, yes, absolutely, very, very much into it. In terms of, like, I also believe in action into what we as individuals can do, or at least I believe in doing, is we need more role models here, right? We need more women to see people who look and behave and have the same circumstances like them, to do it before us, to believe that we can do it, right? When I was doing it, I didn't know, and probably that's why it took me so long to even sort of navigate into this whole private space, right? I come from a typical Banya family. First of all, to tell them that I'm going to sort of like, or rather to sort of say, give me your money to manage, and I'm like sort of good enough to do this. It was a challenge. But then to tell the family that, hey, you know, let's invest into unlisted space where we don't know what profitability is and when we'll see this thing. It was a huge, huge challenge, right?
Yeah.
So education is a must. In my capacity, the way I like to sort of put action is sort of encourage more women to take charge of their own wealth decision. I know Shelley quoted this number that 72% of women are making their own financial decisions. I hate to disagree with you, Shelley. I think this number, and everybody sitting in this room will agree with me, this number is absolutely not true in India. I think it's more like 7%. Even women who have ownership of financial assets in their name are not making their own financial decisions. And I think that's one step which we really, really need to sort of work on, to sort of make women understand how to invest, not just in public markets, but also in private markets.
Yeah, and Shuvi, I mean, turning to you, of course, you're working with Lightspeed, an American brand that is investing in India. What are you seeing here as an opportunity? You know, talk to us a little bit about the shift of technology that you're seeing that's keeping you excited, and if there is opportunity for women to build within those spaces.
Yeah, actually, as people were talking here, I was thinking back to 9 years ago when I first joined Lightspeed and what the world was like then versus now. Because today we look at these numbers and we think it's not enough. But if we think about how far we have come in the last 10 years, I think even that requires appreciation, right? I think at that point, Vani was possibly the only woman GP in the whole ecosystem. Today we have a dozen. In terms of even founders that came into pitch, I'd say barely any female co-founders, right? Forget women CEOs. Today, at least, we have women co-founders, even if we don't have as many women CEOs. And I remember as an analyst, you would talk to your friends at other funds and, you know, you'd ask, Acha, why did you pass on this company? And sometimes you would hear that, you know, oh, this person's likely to have a baby in the next year, or this person's just gotten married, or the husband is so rich, why would this person have the same fire? Like, these are actual quotes I remember from 10 years ago, right? And today, I think that conversations just disappeared. Like, I have not had a single conversation like that at our fund, and from what I understand, like, this is not just about Lightspeed, but about the ecosystem and how we've all grown to understand and appreciate that women can be, you know, equally successful, if not more, as CEOs and founders. So I think there's a lot that has changed in the last 10 years. And you know, as a country, of course, India is one that both optimists and pessimists are right about, you know, their speculations in India. It's a country so large and so rapidly changing, it's hard to have one answer. Top down, you know, we are, 4 trillion in GDP, 5 trillion in stock market cap. Bottom up, there are questions about job creation. Yeah. There are questions about, okay, what are core sectors that will, you know, drive us into the next decade? What will AI do to our services economy? I think they're all very real questions, and I think the venture world's also grappling with some of this over the last 2 years, right? So coming to your question around just changes in the landscape, I'd say we rode the digitization, the smartphone penetration wave, the geo wave very well. So many companies got created, with the whole offline to online move. And now over the last couple of years, with no step jumps or no very, very strong tailwinds at play, what we are all seeing is a move towards more secular tailwinds. So, of course, when there was geo, right, in 2 years, the number of people with a smartphone, the number of people on WhatsApp buying online went up by 50 million, 100 million. But today, what we are seeing is perhaps, themes of premiumization in certain pockets, and we see a lot of consumer brands riding on that theme. We see financial inclusion continuing to happen, and I think that's another theme that will continue to be strong over the next 10 to 20 years. So we are seeing a lot more, I'd say, secular tailwinds and businesses built along those lines versus the grow really fast, burn a lot of capital
At
to
all
get
costs.
there.
No growth at all costs anymore.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, a good sensibility that's set in once capital was not as easily available. But even in terms of just the macros, right? I think this is the time to build more rationally with the right cost structures, with the right growth expectations. Because we've also realized, I'd say one assumption that we all had 10 years ago was this move from low income to middle income will happen in the next 5, next 7 years. That's taken longer, right? And so the amount of money that you pour into having that J curve in terms of growth, like do you actually get rewarded by it commensurately at the end of those 10 years? I think those are questions people are asking, and people are realizing, where India is, what we can rationally expect, and so building businesses the right way. But there's certainly a shift in terms of models that we are seeing and are open to investing in, which is great because in a sense it's broadening of the venture opportunity in India. Most funds have expanded the capital that they manage and are now open to sectors that 5 years ago would have more reservations on.
Yeah, and talking about changing models, Priya, I know you have to jet off shortly, so I do want to turn to you. What are you excited by? $1 billion is a ton of money in the India opportunity. Talking about this platform shift, tactically, what do the founders have to look forward to in GC's, General Catalyst's role in the ecosystem?
I think it's important to share the genesis of the marriage of VH and GC, right? In 2023, I went to my partner and I said, I'm a little disillusioned with the venture in India, right? And I'll say why. Disillusioned because to a lot of what Shuvi said, which is the first point I made about the standard global models that are structurally relevant for venture, which is these are the returns, you have to get venture money, which all leads to certain incentives and disincentives. And we have not layered it to the nuances of the geography, which I said. So one thing that, I went back and I was thinking 6.5 years, 7 years into building VH and investing is that there were many companies where they were structurally strong companies. They needed time because it's like running inside a train. You can only do so much. Capital can only do so much. And what happens is when you give capital to founders, they are doing the best in terms of capital allocation, especially when they're category creators because they're learning and there's a learning curve and people pay a price for learning curve. So one, just like you expect models to change from founders, I think it's also important for us to reflect back and see how should venture evolve, right? So what kind of productization of capital that we need to do for a country like India? Does it mean we put together talent instead of just investing in talent? Do we do incubation? Do we do a mutant of what PEs have done successfully at later stage to pick up certain industries where many VCs say, look, this is capital intensive, so I won't touch. So that's the genesis of the marriage, which is what GC has been doing in the US, which is to think of venture as a platform and not just a venture capital place, which is to think of ourselves more like a technology company. And we say, we have a CEO, we are all business unit heads. How do we create sustainable, long-term innovation, which is nuanced to the country? Then when we married into GC, the only thing we said is, you have to lay a productization of the geography as well, which means you can't think about venture globally alone, but what are the nuances of India? So to answer your point, two things, I'm excited about helping manufacture some of this innovation, right? And helping with our agency of capital, networks, policy connects. How do we create and perhaps nudge those structural challenges a little bit and take a certain set of bolder bets, which otherwise I would have been constrained as a typical $100 million seed fund?
Yeah. Vani, do you agree with this, that the venture model has to be adjusted for India, and how does that look like today? I mean, for a lot of GPs, what we're seeing is a lot more new managers coming to the forefront, right? Which is important to build the ecosystem and where women will continue to make decisions. How do you see this? Where's the returns? Are we still seeing, the long gestation period for India, or are we going to be surprised?
The gestation period in the near future for India will continue to be long, partly because we are in an earlier innovation cycle. In fact, I'll step back. There's a lot to learn from history, which is why I am an ardent student of history from many aspects, right? Even business, but otherwise also. In 96, when I raised capital, Sequoia Capital then, which of course, as one of the older venture capital firms, first of all didn't have anything in India, nobody did. But they were a 450 million fund, okay, then. And I don't think they even knew there would be a 8 or a 10 billion fund. In 96, you couldn't have guessed that. The total capital I raised before I sold my company was one step of capital, which was $5 million from Sequoia Capital. Okay, before that, I was bootstrapped. I had some angel funding, about $1.5 million, but I was largely bootstrapped. And I wasn't alone. So there, I was not the outlier. I didn't know, living in Silicon Valley, anybody, unless you were in a semiconductor and building a fab or something, anybody in a software ever having raised more than $20 million, right? So venture capital has changed in US. After 2 or 3 decades, it was this model for a long time. So India is early in its venture journey and how fast companies can accelerate. Everything is about money in, money out. We forget that, it is a virtuous cycle. Money, economy, anyway, is a virtual cycle. You have to put in, you have to get more than what you put in through whatever means, right? And if venture capital is not generating an alpha return, somewhere, because money is global and fungible, will just not be there. So India will have a different cycle. You got to figure out what's the cycle for India today. But more importantly, like we talk about founder market fit, certain founders are very good at innovation businesses. Certain founders are very good at operational heavy businesses. So not every founder who's successful in a certain business model or a certain kind of a company can be also successful in a different company. That is logical. It's the same for venture capitalists also. First and foremost, whether you are a man or a woman, you got to figure out what is your passion, what are you interested, what are you good at, right? I'm very passionate about early stage investing, and I like being at the idea going from 1 to 10 million stage where I can work very closely with founders. I truly find that as important role I think I can play, and I think I am good at playing that role from my perspective. So, I am not that interested in a PE model of funding growth stage companies because the skill sets also are different. Your role is also different. It's not that it's a better or a worse, and I know some people who are very, very good at the seed stage, accelerator stage. So we need people, it's like a chain link, and somebody else may be very good at a public company. I have never sat on a public company board. Whenever I could, I have resigned well before because I just am not at all. Actually, I was in one public company, but I begged them to let me go after 2 years. And I said, I can't do this anymore. This is just a journey of self-discovery. It's not about how big my fund is. In fact, whenever junior people in our firm have asked, when will we be $1 billion fund? I never. If you wanted that, you shouldn't be here. But think about how you are a 200 million fund that can return $2 billion, which we have done and proved that India can generate alpha returns, right?
I think we need to pause there. 200 million fund that returned to?
One of them did.
$2 billion.
But my point is, I said you could be $1 billion fund returning $2 billion. What is it that we are very stuck, unfortunately, in these numbers. My company's valuation, I've reached a unicorn, but in 6 months, you're not profitable and you're going bankrupt. Why? I think we also perpetuate that. We have to focus on what's the value created, and everybody has a place to shine you got to figure out what is that place that you are going to carve out for yourself because you're good at it, because more importantly, you're passionate about it. Right?
Absolutely.
So I don't think every venture fund needs to be $1 billion fund. In fact, sometimes that itself has made many funds in Silicon Valley, so there's something to learn from history, have gone, the storied firms in 96 that I went to, some of them don't even exist. They got too big. That wasn't their forte, didn't have the right teams for that. And, that's not to say we don't need $1 billion funds in India. We do, but it's just that you got to figure out where do you want to play.
Yeah, and we're short on time here, but let's take it home with quick words of advice, single line. What is one key takeaway, if nothing else? Starting with Aarti.
We don't rise up to our goals, we fall to the strength of our systems. We really need to change systematic barriers which are preventing women founders to get access to funding. As an LP, as an investor, we are willing to fund funds and companies which are willing to swim against the tide. So if you're probably going to come and say something to me and invest in something which is a trend which I know, I don't want to be part of that. Please come and tell me what you're doing which is swimming against the tide. And if that is women-founded companies, let's go for it.
Love it. Shuvi.
I'd say play the long game. I think if you're playing a 10-year game in India, you cannot go wrong. It's a growth market. All boats will rise. And most founders, they won't admit it, but they run out of motivation before they run out of money. So as long as, you keep your eye on the prize and don't get too affected by near-term turbulence, I think we'll all be fine. We'll all make a lot of money.
And Vani, single line here.
Don't give up on your dreams. Continue to dream. I think there are many things that come in the way, but if you persist, dream can become reality. And the biggest thing we all need to own is our own dreams.
Priya.
Well, there's so much motivation, so I'm going to say something realistic.
Yeah.
I think my biggest motivation has been to just show up. Just show up, guys. It's very important to just show up. It's okay to have bad days. It's okay to be alone and feel lonely, but just show up.
Love it.
Show up.
And for showing up, can we give a round of applause? Priya, Vani Kola, Shuvi, and Aarti Gupta, funding the future of innovation right here in India. Thank you, ladies.
And thanks so much for tuning in this week. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow our socials on Sarah Chen Global to get the latest on the show. It would really help me out too if you enjoyed this to rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts and share your favorite episodes with a friend. I'm Sarah Chen-Spellings, and you've been listening to $1 Billion Moves.